Welcome to the Intrazone Haunted Roadmap Pitstop, October 2019 edition. Okay, enough of Count Dracula. This is the bonus monthly show that answers that burning question in your mind. What's rolling out now for SharePoint and related Microsoft 365 technologies? Obviously, it's Halloween season here in the States, and this episode is the end of the road map, if that ghoulishly answers that question. This month, I talk with Adriana Wood, who is a senior program manager on the SharePoint team, who's focused all on the new site URL rename feature. You're going to hear all about it. Consider this the message center for everyone, not just for cloud admins. We'll keep everyone informed and ahead of the ever-curving Microsoft 365 roadmap. And I will make a deal with you this month. I give you this roadmap information in exchange for one SharePoint of blood. Let's start with employee engagement. What is happening around your intranet? Or better yet, what's possible now in your intranet to do all of that broadcasting loud and proud of information across and throughout your company? We start with the big topic of this show when we get to talking with our guest, Adriana, is the SharePoint site URL rename. This is something we're making possible for SharePoint administrators to actually change site URLs. As a global or SharePoint admin, you'll be able to change the URL for all site types. You can do it for classic team sites, communication sites, and both modern team sites and those that are Office 365 group connected or not. So, for example, if you had a site named contoso.sharepoint.com/sites/development, where by chance you misspelled development, you can go in and change the spelling. But certainly the support of scenarios where you want to change a project name into a real final production name, you can do that. There's a lot of great scenarios that are supported. And best of luck, the service automatically generates redirects to ensure that old links don't break. I'm going to take a moment here and actually share some audio from the SharePoint conference with Navjot Virk, who is one of our leaders in the SharePoint engineering team. Navjot did a great first demo, and it's really nice to hear the audience reaction to that. So let's take a moment and hear Navjot from the SharePoint Conference 2019.
And finally, we're addressing one of the top user voice requests from you. You can now change the URL of a site. I have a site here that used to be called Project vReality. We have since renamed the site. It's called Drone. The site owner has already updated the name of the site and the content. But notice that the URL still says Project vReality. You can now go to the admin center, and with just one click, I can change the URL of this site. So I'm going to call it Drone. Hit save. If I want, I can update the name of the site here too, but in this case, the site owner has already updated the name, so I'm going to skip that step. It's going to take a few seconds to update the URL. We're making sure that once we update the URL, everything on the site keeps working. Nothing is broken. Just give it a few seconds. Once it's updated, I'm going to click on the new URL, and notice it's the same site. All the content is there. But you may ask, what about the links that were pointing to the old site? Well, we fixed that too. Yes. So here I have an email that was sent to me by Megan yesterday. She shared, you can see it came a few days ago. She actually shared a file with me that pointed to this particular site, which I've just renamed. When I click on this link, notice that I can open the file. That's because we're redirecting. You can clap. We are redirecting any of the links that pointed to the old site to automatically point to the new sites, so your users don't get disrupted. Sync will continue to work. Most recent files list will continue to work. Any sharing links, everything continues to work. And best of it, as an admin, you don't have to copy the content from the old site to the new site. So as you can see, we're bringing a lot of innovation to make your life as an admin easier and give you greater peace of mind. Thank you.
I can still hear all the echoes clapping here in the studio. That was a great moment. And like I said, we're going to be talking to Adriana, who's going to take us deep into how they thought about it and planned it. So we'll get to that in just a moment. The next thing that I want to talk about is the SharePoint Start page. We used to call this the SharePoint Home page, and this is the page that you click when you click on the SharePoint tile in the Office 365 app launcher. This whole page has been redesigned with a new layout and some new capabilities to help you get ready with what's coming in your day. Obviously, it starts with news at the top that aggregates news from all the sites that you belong to or are active in, but also takes into account organization news that will be flowing top down to everybody. It also shows you a list of your sites, frequent, following, recent, and suggested. And then at the bottom is where the real big change and the real personalization of this page shows up. You'll see featured links for everyone, recent documents, and saved for later. Recent documents are a list of your recent documents or whomever signed in. And saved for later is an aggregate of both saved documents and saved news articles. In that flow of whatever you've saved for later, it'll appear there on the new SharePoint Start page. This connects to the SharePoint home sites that'll be coming soon, so expect these to work great together to have a great first experience on your company's portal page, what we call the SharePoint Start page. Next thing I want to talk about is an acquisition that we recently announced in the migration space. Microsoft acquired Mover. These are a great new set of people that know migration and, of course, had great technology to help with cloud storage migration into Microsoft 365. This complements what we've already had out there with the SharePoint Migration Tool, and certainly through the Fast Track motion, if you work with our Fast Track team, this will benefit if you have some of the content that lives in third-party cloud storage that you want to bring into OneDrive or SharePoint and experience through the Office apps and Microsoft Teams. We'll have more to share at Ignite, which is just around the corner. We've got a migration session at Ignite where you can learn more and, of course, see demos and meet the team. And we're also planning a migration episode here on the Interzone with Haney Loza and Eric Warnke, who are now both Microsoft employees. So very excited to share with you the Mover acquisition. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can read more, and of course more coming at Ignite. Now, additionally with migration, we've got now at general availability, the SharePoint Migration Tool now supports SharePoint Server 2010, and in addition previously supported SharePoint 2013 migrations from on-premises, along with file shares. So think holistically of Mover now giving us sort of cloud storage into Microsoft 365 storage, and the SharePoint Migration Tool being able to give you that on-premises migration. And of course, with a lot of tools that are offered in our third-party ecosystem, collectively, we make it really super simple to give you the right tools, the right people, and of course, the right processes to get content into Microsoft 365. Very exciting innovation, great space for helping people onboard, and it's something that we really want to put a lot of focus on to make it right for what customers are trying to get in as they're starting to invest more and more in their people and content in Microsoft 365. Now, turning a little bit from migration, I want to talk about some of the new Microsoft Stream technology, specifically video editing and file replacement. You can now trim the beginning and end of your videos. The new trim feature makes it easy to remove unwanted footage at the beginning or at the end of the video, including live events and Teams meeting recordings. Also new in Stream is the ability to change your file. So if you have a completely new file, you'll remain and keep the same link. It kind of reminds me of the site URL rename that we were talking about. But this new feature enables video owners and Stream admins to upload a new version of a video without changing the video link, details, or permissions. Really powerful, especially when you want that flexibility to update an entire video without having to break anything that you referenced about that video before. So great new innovation coming from Microsoft Stream, video editing, and file replacement. So with that in mind, this context of replacement, let's talk about replacing site URLs a little bit more. Let's turn and talk with Adriana Wood, Senior Program Manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint engineering team, to get a look behind the scenes of how they built and planned and now are rolling out site URL rename. So let's turn to going behind the scenes, specifically on one of the features we mentioned earlier in the episode around site rename. We are here now with Adriana Wood, who is a senior program manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint engineering team. And you probably do a lot more things, but you got the lucky charter of doing site rename. So welcome to the IntraZone.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, it is indeed a lucky charter and an awesome feature that I got to work on.
But before we get into the tech, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got onto this part of the SharePoint team.
So I actually started working with SharePoint before I came onto the SharePoint team. I developed on top of SharePoint. So I built in Xbox, we have a knowledge management system that was built on SharePoint. So I worked on that knowledge management system as design and then the implementation. So I'm a big fan of the product and also a customer of the product before I started to work on the other side of it. And now I've been, I think, around 4 years working on SharePoint. I've worked on various areas. I'll just mention a couple of ones that might resonate with folks. Cloud hybrid search. So if you ever heard about that capability,
yes,
multi-geo as well, and of course, site rename. And I am currently also working on a very cool set of features that we'll announce at Ignite.
All right. So you've got some things in your pocket that you're going to be sharing soon.
Yeah, always.
In a couple of days when this episode goes live. Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say with your background that Xbox, in quotes, runs on SharePoint?
Yes, there's a good part of Xbox that runs on SharePoint, and Microsoft as well runs on SharePoint. So we are users of our own product.
Excellent. Well, hopefully maybe we'll get some new gamers from the audience. We'll pitch that as now you know.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. if I can speak officially for Xbox, but definitely fun experience working with SharePoint from that perspective. And it also gives me, I think, a reasonable understanding of how our customers utilize the product and what some of the needs might be, both for developers as well as end users.
I think the lens that you all are taking of obviously listening to the customer voice, specifically through user voice, we, with this particular feature, we're going to talk about site rename. Yeah. Audibly, this got huge claps at the SharePoint Conference 2019, and we actually stole some of the audio from that in a previous show that we called Just the Facts. So Sebastian Fouillade gave us the sort of information that we want you to finish the sentence. Mm-hmm. He said, in preview now and out by
end of year. However,
yes,
we might have some pre-Halloween surprises for you. So yeah, site rename, the first time we demoed it in any context to customers was at the SharePoint conference in May. Our global group manager, Navjot Virk, did an awesome job demoing it on stage, and super fortunate to get our feature shown in the keynote, and also very grateful to the audience. I think there were 2 segments. When she first introduces the feature, the room kind of starts clapping, and then she does the rename, and then lastly, she tells you some very important facts about rename, and that was the second clap. So I was there in the audience, and also with some of the folks from my engineering team. So really thrilled to see the response.
The big claps put a little emphasis on, okay, let's get it right, which was your whole job, was to get it right.
Yeah, and we always do.
Of course.
Even if there's no clap in the room, we want to do what is best for the customers. Now, in terms of rollout and release, we actually started doing our production rollout, and we will be completing very soon. So you should expect to see the feature on live before Ignite.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
So, this was a top user voice request, and it's always great when you can finally mark, interested, doing it now, completed, So I bet you'll have that change coming up. Mm-hmm. But talk us through, when we announced at the SharePoint conference, obviously it went into a preview phase.
Yes.
What were some of the things that you learned during preview that now would be what you experience if you're experiencing it for the first time in production?
Yeah. So, first, as you mentioned, we keep a close eye on user voice. So I want to thank everyone who submits their comments and feedback in user voice. And this particular one was highest requested ask around SharePoint administration. And then as we entered into preview, and without kind of mentioning a lot of what went behind the design, one of the things we wanted to do is to introduce the feature at a sort of basic level to understand what kind of feedback we would get from our customers and what the usability of the feature would be, what else would they want to see. One of the principles that we used for this feature, because it's very simple to change a URL, but the real impact to our users, to our customers, is the things that would not work when you change that URL. If you shared an email with somebody in the past or you had a document that referenced that site, unless we did something very special, those links would be broken. There's a lot of experiences in SharePoint as well that depend on URLs and across the O365 ecosystem. We have a lot of workloads that plug in. So we took a systematic approach into figuring out what those dependencies are and how we would address them to ensure that the customer experience would be as seamless as possible. That was kind of part of our design philosophy. I mentioned earlier that I worked in multi-geo, and in multi-geo we had a similar concept where we're actually moving the sites. So we're not renaming them necessarily, but we're moving them from one data center into another, and we ensure functionality. So we had a fairly good idea in terms of design and experience based on those changes that we learned from to take into site rename. Then in preview, it was awesome, to be honest, the level of feedback and the level of engagement that we got. We had, I think, it's around 2,500 folks in the preview.
Wow.
So we went into preview right after the May event, and within the first week, there were over 2,000 site renames, with most of the folks in preview having done at least one.
Well, I will tell you, on a webinar that I was on this morning, I actually heard from our MVP, Sue Hanley. She actually just in production renamed her first site. I don't know if you saw her tweet, but they had a real use case. They had named a project site that was very usable in production, but then they went and changed it to a pretty practical name.
Yeah.
And they had already changed the actual name that somebody would see visually,
Yeah.
but they were really excited to then roll it in. And what was really interesting, it was for a French-Canadian company. So even the spelling was very particular. The URL had to, meet the spelling and the usability. And she was super pleased, and obviously the customer was very happy that it was possible. So one of now 2,001 sites that have been renamed.
Yeah, more than that. At this point, it's a lot more than that.
Oh, good.
We received a lot of awesome feedback during the preview. For instance, we initially were showing the experience as changing the URL, not necessarily including the change to the site display name. So that was one of the feedbacks that came very early on. I think by the May event, we actually showed the pop-up that allows you to do that. We also receive feedback, especially when it comes to group sites, to be able to change the group display name. So, we let the folks in preview, yes, we would be making it available. So we worked with a lot of partners across O365 to ensure that their workloads would remain consistent. For instance, to give you an example, our own sync client, when you're doing the rename, it backs off from syncing, and then when the rename finishes, it will restart syncing to the new URL.
On the new URL.
Other sync loads like OneNote is an excellent partner we've worked with extensively in this endeavor. They also do the same thing. You name it. Partners like Flow as well. We send a special request to Flow to update the flows. We also, if you've ever used, Office documents, when you open the most recently used files, we also do something very special to the service that controls that, in that we send them a request to update those links. So even if you're outside of SharePoint and you're using your Office client, you will get an updated experience.
Yeah, I honestly took sort of a simplistic view of, they're renaming the site, site URL changes. And of course, they're working on making sure every link continues to work.
Yeah.
But I never thought of it in the context of when you use, and we promote SharePoint as a content service to all of these other applications. You just listed 2 or 3, and I'm sure there's 10 or 15 more.
Yes.
But really as a backbone to where your content is stored, that it all needs to still plumb through intact.
Yeah, it's basically about keeping the experience as seamless as possible. And, my engineering team did an awesome job. We obviously were still listening to feedback and taking additional requests always. But, the awesome job, as well as this kind of feature takes a lot of folks, not just engineering, who I hope, they're all listening to this podcast, but also design. We also did user studies and, of course, all the partner workloads that we work with.
One of the things that, as you were describing, a lot of the work that you did and put into planning and design is this notion of the modern intranet, at least the way that SharePoint and other technology is built, is its intent is to be flexible.
Yes.
When there are business changes, so too can the tech behind that supports whatever the business is doing. So you mentioned multi-geo. If your people move or you want to have the content in the different geography, that's possible. The other ones I can think of are the site swap. I have a site that I'd rather have at the root, and I can now put it there. And the site, the URL rename fits right into that, giving more flexibility to whomever needs it, when the time comes. You mentioned a team site. You can certainly change the URL. Is there any limitations to the site types that people can adjust?
Yes. So right now in our V1, we allowed the highest used site types. So your modern site, I know we use the word modern a lot, so that would be current site template as well as group connected sites, communication sites. And then we also went back into our most used classic template, which is the classic site, so you can also perform URL renames. But again, we are actively listening to see where you have those needs. These needs kind of came from our own analysis on what was most used in the service, as well as feedback that we received in preview.
So previously in the episode, we heard Navjot's first reveal, of course, with the clapping, and she went through it. But I want to get it from your, if you were to describe it audibly, you said renaming a site URL is easy. I don't believe you, but maybe that's true.
Well, in the grand scheme
but
of the
problem. I have seen the demo, and I know the way that you have all built it. Explain the steps through what somebody does to go rename. Just maybe like a visual demo.
Okay, so visually, imagine that you are a SharePoint site administrator. In most cases, you will have a request from a site owner that they need to change the URL. Usually what I hear is anything from team projects getting renamed to we have even companies that have policies around naming. So you get that request, you go into your admin center, that is your SPO admin center. You click on the site information pane. And then there is the site URL. You click on change, and then you will get a box that contains the URL, the name portion of the site. You enter the name that you desire. We do a check to make sure, of course, as you know, you cannot have two sites with the same URL in your tenant. So we do a check to make sure that that is good to go. And then after that, we do the steps for site rename. I don't know if I'm getting into much detail, but we do a lot of checks onto the health of your site, because when we rename a site, we want to ensure that that site is in a healthy state. So we do all of those operations. We do the update operations. So there's a lot as part of site rename that we are doing behind the scenes. We're even going into every web part inside your site, and we're scanning it and making sure the links are getting updated. We're sending the request to the partner workloads. So we do all of that. I know it's, when you saw it, when Navjot showed it, it was a few seconds, but a lot goes behind the scenes in those seconds. And then, we update the URL. If you had a link to the old site URL, we set a redirector site in its place. So when you click to that link, you are redirected. Your users will continue to use the site as they normally have, and, the various workloads that I mentioned are getting updated.
And if I had received a chat with a link to some, not just the site, but let's say a list in that site. So the URL, blah, 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 plus the list, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And that had in the actual construct of the text in the chat, the old site name in the URL. If I go back to that chat and click on it after a site's been renamed, what's my experience?
Yeah, so you would get redirected. That is because we take that redirector approach. So all of your browser requests that you make to the site get redirected.
Excellent. Well, I know if people want to learn more, you've got a great asset. Where can people go learn more about site rename?
Yes. So we have a short link for you, and that is aka.ms/site rename, and that links you to our documentation.
I will make sure to have that in the blog.
Awesome.
We'll make sure to be loud and proud about, go learn more. But hearing you obviously describe it, I've seen it demoed a number of times. It really is straightforward. You have the need to rename a site, just go do it. So, Adriana, thank you for your time here on the Interzone, and even more so, thanks for the time to not only get to preview, but through preview and listen to customer feedback and provide them a great new feature.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, and thank you to our customers who submitted the feedback and who participated in preview and gave us even more feedback. Really appreciate hearing from you, and it's been a privilege to work on this feature. Go try it out. Thanks.
Always nice to hear from our engineering team, and really great to hear how Adriana and all the folks that are working on site rename heard about what we heard from our customers in user voice and implemented that through preview and now into production. So let's turn to teamwork. What is it that you need most when you're actually working and collaborating across one-to-one conversations, one-to-many groups that are formed together virtually or hierarchically always working together? We always want to make sure you have the best tools to collaborate and work together. The first update really comes in the world of sync. You heard Adriana talk about how they focus on anything that is syncing previously from a previous site continues to sync with the new site URL. Well, one of the new sync innovations for this month that has also come is the differential sync for all file types. This means you sync only the parts of large files that have changed, not the entire file. This makes the file synchronization process faster for those files, and it also reduces the time taken to upload and download a file as well as any consumed bandwidth. So a much better performance and experience for end users, and certainly better for the company that you're consuming less bandwidth. This month, we're rolling out the ability to leverage differential sync to all types of files, including JPEGs and PDFs, movie files, MP4s, CAD files, you name it. Anything stored in OneDrive and SharePoint will now have differential sync and a much better experience. One small note here is this has always been supported for Office documents and will continue to do so now that differential sync truly will apply to all file types. Switching gears a little bit, when you think about viewing content in SharePoint, sometimes you want to view content in a SharePoint list. The next feature I want to share is the ability to build custom view formatters to make it so that anybody who's making a new view for a list can create a tile view using simple JSON. To do this, you build a JSON object that describes the elements that are displayed when a row is loaded in a list view and any styles to be applied to those elements. View formatting does not change the data in the list. It only changes how they're displayed to users who browse the list. I'll encourage you to go to the blog so you can see visually what we mean when you put a tile view against a list. It makes it really nice, essentially like a card view. There's a lot of great documentation that we'll point to. Anyone who can create and manage views in a list can use view formatting to configure how those views are displayed. Really nice, powerful way to represent what could be just a row of data to have it be a visual card layout display. Again, links to how-to and a couple of examples that we'll include. So with that customization thread in mind, let's talk about form customization in SharePoint lists and libraries. Our intent is to make it easier to configure the visibility and ordering of fields in a SharePoint list or library from a forms perspective. Users can click Show or Hide fields in the Property form or in the Details pane to perform this configuration. Super easy with the new UI, and when you make the change, you're actually making a change to the default form. You're not building a new form. You're just augmenting what it is that the current form shows or what the current form collects if you're doing it for data entry. Really simple to do, and it really adds to that flexibility of how you can make SharePoint lists and libraries not only do what you want, but look like what you want. So let's move into related tech. The related tech, I have 3 things that I want to share, and it's really a place where you can go and learn more or just get a lot of information about some of the folks that have driven innovation in the past. And specifically, my second item, I think you'll see how that person has driven technology in a really big way. So first up is the Microsoft 365 Learning Paths on Microsoft Learn. If you want to up your game and get yourself prepared to take a Microsoft certification, this is the place to go. This is a new approach to learning by offering about 22 learning paths that are on demand. These are dynamic and interactive experiences that'll help you achieve your technical and professional goals faster. They take a self-guided learning path scenario where you can take charge on your own learning and on your own time. And for example, there is the Collaborate with SharePoint in Microsoft 365 learning path that includes learning for SharePoint in Microsoft 365, understanding site options, using files and folders and methods to best manage sites. And it's a really great package that'll walk you through in a limited amount of time, so it doesn't take a long time. This is not days of training. These are minutes and hours. But there's a lot of content, not only for SharePoint, but really through the breadth of what Microsoft offers. But a learning path, obviously, one topic leads to the next, and you can really consume them on your own. We'll put a link to the top level and a link to the one that I mentioned, the Collaborate with SharePoint in Microsoft 365, so you can get a flavor for how to use Microsoft Learning Paths now on Microsoft Learn. The next related tech is something that comes to us from our friends at Netflix. And it is a new documentary about Bill Gates. This is the Bill Gates documentary called Inside Bill's Brain, Decoding Bill Gates. We'll definitely put a link in the show notes. I highly suggest watching it. I thought I'd break it down into the 3 parts that it's delivered, and it has 3 50-minute episodes. And then I thought I'd share a little bit of why I thought it was interesting in watching it. Certainly, when I started my career here at Microsoft, Bill Gates was at the president level, and as he moved through the different iterations, and Steve Ballmer, and now with Satya Nadella, he's always been connected and is really a big part of the fiber of what drives this company. And it's really exciting through this documentary to see what now drives him post-Microsoft. Part 1 really focuses on the intent to help fix sanitation throughout the world, to innovate on toilets and water treatment plants. One of those things when you look at what they're trying to do, simple ideas, hard to do. It's that implementation at the world scale, especially where it's needed, so that people aren't getting sick just from poor sanitation. Part 2 gets into this take on wanting to eradicate polio. And it's one of those situations where you, through the eyes of Bill and, of course, all the smart folks that he's working with, you see him tackling a problem that we have solved, but just implementing it out into the far reaches of where it's really hard to get medical assistance and technology. Really interesting to see in part 2. And the last part 3 really focuses on reducing greenhouse gases and a focus of new energy resources, which is sort of a relook at what nuclear energy might do. I also really liked in part 3 how there was a focus of Bill and Melinda from a relationship perspective, not just from the foundation perspective. If you have any interest in what drove Microsoft in the early days, and certainly where he's gone post-Microsoft, it's worth a viewing. So last in related technology is really just a visual into what's to come. There were 4 really big events that really focused on new devices that were unleashed to the world. So it's a lot of new devices, and I just really wanted to put a lens on how the focus of the SharePoint and OneDrive team are focused on making sure that our experiences are great across all of these devices. So if you think about most of these are mobile devices, there was the Samsung event to release the new Galaxy Note 10 and 10 Plus. There was the Apple event, of course, which talked about the new iPads and the new Mac OS, Catalina. There was our own Surface event that revealed all the new products that we're launching, big and small. Some to come not until next year, but certainly a focus on the smaller screen, maybe even 2 small screens. And at the Made by Google event, they announced the new Pixel 4, Chromebook, and the Pixel Watch. Now, across the obvious ones that are more desktop or mobile-oriented, I will tell you, we were a part of the Galaxy Unpacked event to highlight what OneDrive is doing specifically with Samsung for the Galaxy Note 10 and 10 Plus. But throughout all these devices, our intent is for you to have a great experience, not just with the SharePoint and OneDrive mobile apps, but through to the content so that you can experience it with the device of choice. A lot of big new announcements across devices, obviously across operating systems and, of course, across companies. But all up, it's interesting to see the futures to be focused on a consistent experience with these services tailored for these unique form factors to bring you the best experience of working with the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Next up, I'll tell you all of the features that are coming your way very soon next month. These are the teasers. Teaser number 1 is the new files experience in Microsoft Teams. I'm not even going to say much more about it. When we cover this, we'll cover it in great detail, and we'll talk a lot about this new files experience in Teams. It's something that you've been waiting for, and I'm really pleased to put it as a teaser coming soon. The second one is a new experience also in Microsoft Teams, which is the new sharing experience in Teams. Both the new files experience and the new sharing experience at the broad level are intended to be consistent experiences across SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Outlook, and a lot of other places, especially when you get into sharing, even on the desktop. We want these to be the same experiences, the same capabilities, so that you don't have to relearn what tool am I in and how do I do X or Y. So with the new files experience and the new sharing experience coming to Teams, that helps bring that future vision more into fruition. That's it with the teasers. We're nearing the lap. Maybe our friend Count Dracula is around the corner. Stay with us. We'll cover resources and, of course, wrap up the show.
I think it is now time to cover resources. These are amazing resources that are available to you all the time. And maybe after you hear this episode, You want to join me in my castle? I will show you around and maybe have you for breakfast. I mean, show you some nice breakfast items.
Okay, we've added a list of important resources and links in the show notes to everything that we've been talking about, and of course, all of the continuous information that we provide through the year. These links will take you to the Message Center, the Microsoft 365 Roadmap, the SharePoint and OneDrive community blogs, and of course, all things Twitter. Our goal is to keep you up to speed, whether you're Count Dracula or just a regular person like me out there. We hope you've enjoyed this nice, smooth ride through the Intrazone Roadmap Pitstop October 2019. Check out the episode's show notes on your podcast player for links and resources. But please do always stay engaged, ask questions, push us to get the best information and insights that you need. We're here to put our and your best change management foot forward. Stay safe out there on the
Roadmap.
Till next month, thanks for
Tuning in.